Okay,
How are you?
good.
Good. Tell me what's going on. Let me start by getting the engine size, okay?
3.5.
I got a 3-liter V6.
I think so.
Okay.
You know what? I couldn't tell you for sure. It's a very weak little car.
Okay, but is it a 4-cylinder or a V6?
I'm just like, actually, my car is 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder. He thinks it's a 4, but
Okay.
I thought it was a 3.5. Okay, 2.2. Does 2.2 make any sense?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's perfect. So tell me what's going on.
It acted a little funny, and then it stalled out on me, and I got it jumped, and then I got 100 feet away, and it stalled again. Then I got checked and realized that, and replaced the battery. Someone helped me replace the battery while we were waiting for a tow truck. Well, so we replaced the battery, then it wouldn't start. Realized that the belt had broken. So, of course, had it towed. Replaced the belt, and drove it home. Let's see. Within 20 or 30 miles of having the belt replaced, I had it checked. I had the alternator checked at Advanced Auto, and they said, oh, the alternator is fine, the starter's fine, but you need a new battery. Of course, that battery was hours old.
Okay.
So then I took it to a place where I bought the battery, and they said, oh, it's not holding a charge. So they replaced it. So now I have a new battery again, but I'm afraid if something's wrong with the car, it's going to drain it out again.
Right. Do you think?
And somewhere in the middle of that, my radio cracked out. So
Okay.
I think it's related somehow.
So let me ask you this: Does the battery drain when the engine's running, or does the battery drain when the engine's turned off?
I don't think it's anything draining it. I think it drains when it's running, because I was running, for hours today, and it was not. The battery was so low that it wasn't strong enough to do a second alternator test.
Okay. Well,
so I guess my question is, what's next? I mean, what can I test, or what do you think could be wrong?
So can you start and run the engine right now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Well, I just got a new battery 2 hours ago, so it'll start a few more times, but I'm just afraid it's gonna not start.
Gotcha. What I would recommend that you do is get a voltmeter, and what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and start the car, and you're going to let it idle. Then you're going to measure the battery voltage. So if the alternator is charging, it should read approximately 14 volts, so DC, so direct current.
Mm-hmm.
If a little bit lower or a little bit more would be acceptable. 13.7, 13.8, 13.9, 14, 14.1, 14.2 is fine. But if you're just still down by like 12 volts or 12.6 or even less than 12 volts, then that indicates the alternator is not charging. And if you have replaced the alternator, but the alternator is not charging, then we got to check the wiring to and from the alternator and possibly check for codes in the computer. Let me take a look here. I'm going to pull up a wiring diagram of this alternator.
Right. Well, I'll test the alternator, the alternator was tested this morning.
So it was tested. Was it tested on the car?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and they said it was charging or was not charging?
They didn't say it was charging or not. They said it was good.
Okay, so that means it probably was charging. So if they test it when it's on the vehicle, so if that checks out good, then your battery shouldn't drain when the engine's running. Okay, so then we shouldn't really even be having this particular conversation. The question becomes, does the battery drain when the engine's turned off? And if that's the case, then we need to look for a battery draw. There's a parasitic draw on the battery when the engine is turned off.
Right. I realize that the radio doesn't work, so maybe all that electrical problem blew a fuse or something. So, but there's nothing else to be on except, and there's no lights on.
Correct, right? So it won't turn the check engine light on. The check engine light comes on only for emissions. So it's like that's an emissions only
No, I
light.
didn't mean that. I meant no headlights, no interior lights.
Oh, okay. So the alternator, I'm sorry, the radio. Yeah, we could have a blown fuse. We didn't check the fuses as of yet.
No.
Okay. Yeah, that would be a good idea. We can check the fuses. And sometimes if the radio goes bad or like another computer or module on board the vehicle, it could cause the battery to drain when the engine's turned off. So actually, I just saw something here. Replace battery, replace disconnected radio. Look at that. It's a common problem on this vehicle. So repaired radio, replaced radio.
Well, I mean, that radio stuff happened during all this other stuff. So what's the common problem? The radio does?
Yeah, the radio goes bad and it causes the battery to drain. That is correct. Yep.
Oh. Well, can I just disconnect this radio?
Yeah, you could. Yeah. Let me see if I can get a wiring diagram. You could start by pulling the fuses, and maybe that'll get rid of it. Get rid of the draw. It's not a permanent fix, of course, but.
Well, if given that the radio's been got bad for 2 days, I mean, so and it's that entirely. I went home the night I changed the battery. Probably got home at 10 o'clock. Parked it overnight and in the driveway the whole day, and over another night, and started this morning.
So it should be fine.
The battery, right? Well, so I'm just saying, in that case, it doesn't sound like it could be the radio causing the battery drain.
So I guess that brings us back to my original question: Does the battery drain when the engine is running, or does the battery drain when the engine is turned off?
How can I tell? How can I even tell?
Well, if you're driving along and the engine stalls and there's no power, that would be when the engine's running.
Well, it stalled until there was a new battery and a new belt. I think it stalled because of the belt or something. So actually, after it sat for one night, a whole day, and another night, drove it to the, 10 or 15 miles to the advanced auto, where they tested the battery. Mm-hmm. The battery was really low.
Yep.
So, and that was a new battery, but that was the first time that battery had been used.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, maybe it could have been the radio causing that first battery.
Yeah, it's possible, because if the belt broke, when you were driving the vehicle, obviously that would prevent the alternator from charging, and that would cause the engine to stall eventually. So if that's the case, then once that's put back on and everything's put back together, it should charge. So like right now, if you got a new alternator or new belt on there, and the battery's been replaced, it should run perfect, and it should be charging at around 14 volts. So we should be good there.
And then got it checked again, and it was so low they couldn't test the alternator again.
Right, I gotcha. Okay. So I do see 2 radio fuses in the instrument panel fuse block. So there's a radio ignition fuse and there's a radio BAT fuse. So if you need to pull the fuses for any reason, or if you come to a point where you want to pull those fuses, those would be the 2 fuses that you'd have to pull.
Okay, so you think it's not just a blown fuse, it's a bad radio. So get rid of the fuses and get rid of that circuit?
You could definitely check the fuses, absolutely. If it's not even powering up and we don't have a battery draw when the engine's turned off, then yeah, absolutely. You could check those fuses right away.
Okay, well, I guess what I'm asking is if I just change the fuses to be to good fuses and the radio does happen to work, it's not going to still be a problem for the rest of the car, is it?
I don't know. Because we don't know what the problem is. It might be. Put it this way: if you find a blown fuse, fuses just don't blow for no reason, right? So there's something that's causing the fuse to blow, and something is in there. But whether or not we can find it is a kind of a different ball game. So if it's blowing a fuse, then you're going to have to trace the circuit, and it could be even a bad radio shorting out itself, causing the fuse to blow. So I don't think just replacing the fuse is going to fix it. No, I don't. I've been doing electronics for 20 years, and rarely does it fix itself. Sometimes problems could go dormant for a long time. But if you find a blown fuse, I would recommend that you check the wiring and possibly even replace that radio.
Okay. All right. So I guess back to the question. So what do I test next?
Well, again, we're gonna make sure the alternator is charging. So I would, if the engine starts and runs, no problem. I would start the engine up, and I would grab a voltmeter, and I would make sure that you're at about 14 volts at the battery with the engine running at idle.
Okay.
So, and if that checks out good, it should start, and it should really just drive, no problem. You said the alternator wasn't replaced, but if it's at 14 volts, the alternator is probably good, and I would think you wouldn't have any issues. Now, if you find that the battery was draining, overnight, then some other tests would have to be done. But I think if that's not the case, I think you'd be all right. I think replacing that belt did the trick, and I think you'll be okay.
Well, it doesn't feel like it's going to be okay because it's already gone through a battery. It haven't fixed anything else yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, the only thing that I guess let me rephrase it. The only other thing that's really going to cause the battery to lose charge is if the alternator isn't charging, the engine's running, or if you have a drain on the battery when the engine is sitting. So if you do have a drain, let's just say you go and you retest everything, and we continue, you find out that the battery is losing charge when the engine's turned off, then you could start by pulling those 2 radio fuses and just let it sit overnight and see if there's any improvement. If there is, well, then it's probably the radio that's draining the battery. If there's not, then at that point, then somebody's going to have to run what they call a battery draw test, and they would basically hook up their voltmeter, and they would pull 1 fuse at a time to see which fuse causes the battery to stop, or the draw or drain on the battery to stop. And once they pull that fuse, the draw will stop, and they'll know which circuit it's on. So that test, if you think there's something else going on, then that specific test or that particular test will have to be run.
Okay. All right. If I'd like to drive it.
What's that?
About 100 miles this weekend in one direction and without having any issue, and then leave it for 3 days, then drive it back.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if I dare to do that.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure either. Again, so as a mechanic, we're not psychics, we're not genies. I can't guarantee that your car is going to be fine, right? So we just, if and when it breaks down, we just run tests to figure out, what's going on. What you could do is you could just hire a mechanic, either a mobile mechanic, or you could bring it to a shop, and you could say, hey, please check the starting system or starting circuit and the charging circuit or system to make sure that everything's okay. Now they can't foresee problems, but they can run tests to see if there's any, underlying issues that might be coming up in the near future.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Okay.
And if you want, what I can do is I can recommend some shops in your area, or I can even connect you with a mobile mechanic if you think that would help.
Maybe a shop would be fine.
Okay.
If you know any that's good at this kind of thing, that's the trouble with shops. I called the shop a couple weeks ago for a different car, and they said, "Oh no, we don't have that. But if you wait 2 weeks, we'll get that piece of equipment and we'll do it." And then the price was twice as much as anyone else was charging.
Oh wow, jeez.
And people don't, not every mechanic.
Correct, right?
They can't be an expert in everything.
Right, exactly. Yep. Well,
if you know any that are good in this charging system thing,
mm-hmm.
I might try them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you bet. I'll send some information over, and if you have any questions or if anything comes up, you can just let me know. I'll be happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye-bye.